so I oftentimes do this on Facebook, and because I drive a lot for work, I will go live on my way home from work, and I've dubbed it the car chat. If you've ever driven long distances multiple times per day, there are several things you can do. You can listen to podcasts, you can listen to the radio, you can have quiet time, and I do all of those things. But the other thing is that I also like to achieve my goals. And one of my goals is to help people, and so we homeschool, and I'm a mom. I have 5 children, and I belong to a lot of homeschool groups. And oftentimes I will see questions and I think, oh my gosh, I want to say something and that I think might be helpful, but I don't have time to type it in or whatever. And my favorite medium is just talking. And so for me, I take those questions that people ask in the group and I just turn them into a video because it's easier for me to answer in video format. So this live video today is really about homeschooling and how do we pick the right curriculum for our children, because all of our children are at different ages, stages, and learning ability, right? So let's say you're going to start homeschooling this year and you have a child who is in maybe 5th grade and maybe they don't read very well. Maybe they can't read at all. What do you do? Because sometimes we take our kids out of public school because we find that they're falling behind or that public school is not helping them to meet their goals. And so that is a very real problem that we face as homeschooling parents when we do that, is how do we get our child to catch up, and what do we do, and how do we help them to not feel like a failure? And this particular question was about math. And so they have a child who is in the 11th grade but is not able to do the math that is on grade level for that grade, and how do you pick a curriculum? So this is my thoughts on how you pick a curriculum for a child who's maybe not on a grade level that would be commensurate with their grade level in a public school setting. So in other words, their performance is below their grade level that they would have in school. And so there's a couple of things that I think is important. One, you first must assess where your student is, right? So you first have to know what is their capability. So for instance, for this child, let's say they're not able to do the algebra. Well, why are they not able to do the algebra? Is it because they don't understand simple concepts? Like, do they understand multiplication, division? Do they understand decimal points? Do they understand fractions, multiplying fractions, dividing fractions, decimal points, those types of things? So first you have to assess, where is your student? Where are their weaknesses? Most of us parents, even if our kids have been in public school, know what our students' abilities are. We see that. If you don't know, and there's no fault there, I'm a full-time working mom, homeschooling. So listen, there are a lot of times when my kids had things that I didn't know they could do or I thought they couldn't do. And I didn't necessarily sit down every night and help them with their homework, right? Because there wasn't a lot of time at that time to do that. And I also felt like if you're at school for 8 hours a day, you really should not have so much homework to do, right? Like, I'm sending you to school so that you can do your schoolwork at school, but when I come home, I want to be able to spend time with you. If I'm just having to do schoolwork at home with you when I get home, then let's just homeschool, because at that point it makes my life much easier too. So sit down with your child and start at the basics. Start with some addition practice. See how long it takes them to add all the factors of 9. So 7 and 3, 6 and 4, 8 and 2, 5 and 4, 5 and 5, all of those things. Then sit down, do a drill, a math drill, and then math drill double-digit numbers. So how long does it take for them to add the 2-digit numbers? And you're wanting to see where their deficiencies are. And if they know all of their math back very quick like this, then it's obviously not the addition piece. Sit down, do the same thing for subtraction. Then you're going to do the same thing for multiplication. So it might take you a whole month of just reviewing the basics. So one day you might do addition up to 10, and then addition to 100, and then addition to 1,000, and then you might do addition to 10,000, addition to 100,000, addition to 1,000,000, right? So That's what I would do the first week. Then I would do subtraction, subtraction to 10, subtraction to 100, subtraction to 1,000, 10,000, and in that would be subtraction with borrowing, right? And addition with carrying. And so both of those would go into play. So at the end of the week, they would have borrowing and carrying. If at any point they get any one wrong, then you have to ask them, okay, what's wrong, right? So if they start to get more problems wrong than right, or let's say they only get a 70% or something like that. Like if they start missing problems, that's an indication that they don't know how to do it, and that means that's something that you need to teach. And so then you teach that concept, right? And so you're just trying to find out where they are. So maybe the third week you're going to do multiplication tables, just the general, all the way up to 10s or 12s, and then you're going to do double-digit multiplications and then hundreds, and then you're going to do division, right? And then I would go to fractions, and then I would go to multiplying fractions and dividing fractions and decimal points, and then I would go and I would look at square roots. So those are all the basics, right? So now you're probably 2 months into homeschooling, and so for math particularly, now you're 2 months in. Now you know exactly where your child is at. Then I would also start doing some problems and some problem sets around fraction work. And so then I would start talking about factors, and I would talk about fact families and all these things, right? So each time that you are going up, in a level, you've got to consider what's the next step, okay? I don't think that there's a curriculum that you can do this really well with sequentially like that. I think the best way is just to make up your own problem, and just in that order. So I would just do addition, and then just like I said, and just make your own problems that way. If you don't feel comfortable, and I think you can do it on something called, if you look up like math, I don't know, there's mathdrills.com, I think is the website. You can do mathdrills.com, and you can put in whether it's, 2-digit, single digit, and you can also on there notate up to what value you want to learn. And so they're just drill sheets. That's a really good way to test and see where they're at. The other way that you can, if you're like, oh, wow, I don't know how to do that, or that seems like a lot, I really wish I had a curriculum that could do that, you can also look for placement tests in curriculum. Excuse me. I think the Good and the Beautiful might have some placement tests online, and you could use their placement test to see where they're at. Matthew C. might have a placement test. Saxon Math might have a placement test. I'm sure Rebecca and Bob Jones probably have free placement tests. You can utilize those as well. The thing that I don't like about those is that usually, though, they give you 1 or 2 problems based on what concept they're testing. And I feel like 1 or 2 problems you could potentially guess and get it right, or you could potentially have a problem that you just happen to know the answer to, but you couldn't do it again in a different situation. So I think it's best if you have just a worksheet, maybe 5 or 10 problems of each kind of thing, and then you know for sure if you know how to do it or not do it. The next thing is so once you figure out where they're at, right? So now you kind of know what's going on. You teach each concept. And once you get those basic concepts down, then you can go and you can look at, let's do Algebra 1. So normally that's the next step in high school math, 9th grade or so, is Algebra 1. And so the one, and now the name actually is going to escape me, All Things Algebra on Teachers Pay Teachers is one of the best programs that I found for math. I am not a math whiz. I've utilized Saxon Math, Matthew C. I have seen like the Hall and Mifflin math, all that stuff, and also I have teaching textbooks as well. But my favorite math so far has been All Things Algebra, and I think she also has All Things Geometry, All Things Algebra 2. I really, really, really appreciate her curriculum. 1, it comes with videos that she teaches for you if you want. 2, your notes and your worksheets are clearly laid out step by step, so your student knows exactly what to do. It includes the notes, the practice problems, and the independent practice problems, and then the homework problems. And so for me, that's really beneficial because I know exactly that my student is going to be taught very well, and even if I don't have the videos to teach them, I can um, I can teach it based on the notes that I have because I have the answer keys to the notes, and so I can usually teach it based on the notes that I have because the notes clearly lay out how to do it, if that makes sense. So she walks them through exactly how to do it each time, and so you have the answer keys as well, which also have that on there. Most of the time, they are worked out on the answer keys. You can actually see the problem set and how it's worked out. I like that. I also like that there's not a bunch of busy work in it, that it has mostly independent practice. Mostly it has the guided practice, the independent practice, and the homework, and then you move on. And if you need more practice, then there are some other things like exit tickets and stuff like that that you can do. There are some fun games. There's a review, and then there's a test at the end of every unit. And so, and I think it all corresponds very well. So she's not teaching something and then asking them to do something that's a lot harder. I don't like curriculums that do that. I don't like curriculums that teach, 2 times 2 is 4, and then they say, well, what's, 200 times 2 or something like that. Like they give you something that's a lot harder to do, but they haven't explicitly explained how to do it. So I like that curriculum. So if I were choosing a math curriculum for someone who has difficulty with math, I would say that's a really excellent curriculum. I don't make any money off of sharing her name. I don't make any money off of the curriculum. I'm not an affiliate, nothing like that. So I've met the All Things Algebra is one that I would highly recommend if you have a student who struggles with math. The other ones that people have tried before are the teaching textbooks, and I've heard great things about that. However, I think right now it's a lot of online work, and I think students can get distracted by that when they have to go online to do the problems and they have to type stuff in on the computer. I think it's just best to keep everything in paper, pencil, and you don't have to open your electronic devices to get distracted by your Snapchat and your Instagram and your Threads and your Facebook and your all the things, right? Like there's all the social media things that are there to distract your kids. And so it's really wonderful that I think that that you can with teaching textbooks if you want to take it offline, and that's where I would do it. I would do it all offline. Also, I would make sure that my students are going through it step by step. They're not just waiting for the videos. That would make it very much active learning if I were using the teaching textbooks. And I've heard parents say that there is a way where sometimes it's not active learning, and in that way it would not be good. So that's what I recommend for someone who may need to have a slower start. So let's say you get out the algebra that I told you all about algebra. You have this 11th grader now, and worked on all of the basic math facts, right? So now you're in the algebra curriculum, and they're working through it, and maybe they are able to do some of the problems without even watching the videos. That's fantastic. Let them do the practice problems, let them do what they know how to do, and move on to the next thing. If they come to something that they don't know how to do, let them watch the video, do the practice problems, the independent practice problems, and then the homework problems, right? So, I think the main thing is that allowing them to be at their own pace. And then the next day you move on to the next lesson, right? And so if they need more practice, then you stay on that practice. If they need less practice, then you just move on. And part of that is going to come from, knowing your student, and part of that is going to come from the curriculum itself. So all about algebra, I think they usually have at least one page or two of practice homework problems. So for my son, I can say, okay, do the first 10 practice problems. If you get them right, then you're done, right? If out of 10 practice problems you miss 2 or 3, then you need to do 10 more. Or you know why you missed them and you have to go back and correct them. And they're going to have a review before the test that's going to go over everything. And so the same concept for the review. If you miss anything on the review, you need to go back and do it again. Oh, excuse me. So that is my take on what to do with a child who is maybe not performing at grade level when we're talking about public school grades and that sort of thing, and how to get them caught up with their peers while they're homeschooling. it's not to go back and teach everything from kindergarten on. It's not to go back to ninth grade and teach everything from ninth grade on. It's really to assess the strengths and the weaknesses, to build up the weaknesses, and then to work with the strengths. And that's the way you get your kids um, to be on grade level. Now, the next question would be, okay, well, I have a kid who their problem is reading. How do I do that? Well, I have found with my kids who struggled with reading, a couple of things have helped. And number one is the almighty, unfortunate, and very hard to convince them to do is read. That is like the number one thing I found that makes kids better readers is getting them to read. And it's the hardest thing to do because kids who can't read very well don't want to read because they have to sound everything out. And so it's finding a really good mix of I'm going to tell you the words when you don't know them, you're going to sound them out when you don't know them, or I'm going to read to you and just let you watch as I read. Those are pretty much the ways that I do it, and I just have to really assess where my kid is at that day and to determine, like, can you read this passage on your own? And sometimes I'll let them read, and then as they start missing more and more words, I say, okay, it's my turn to read. And I think that helps. So just letting them know that you're able to help them. And then also, I think as you're reading, they get to see the words, and you point to the words as you read, and that helps. So that's what I would say about reading, is just getting them to read more. The problem is that as kids get older, they want to read things that are more associated with their intellectual ability, and their reading ability and their intellectual abilities don't match up. And so they're reading books that are really boring because their reading ability is not where their intellectual ability is. And so if you come alongside them and make the intellectual reading possible by reading the words that are too hard for them, they become interested in the book, and they can read the words they can read. You read the words that are not within their level yet, and that will make them a better reader because they'll see you reading the words, and then also feel free to sound words out for them as you're reading. Let's say you're reading a book, and let's say it's about a carpenter, and you get to the word carpenter. It's okay for you to look at the word and say carpenter, and that way they see you sounding words out, right? Showing them how to sound a word out. So if they don't know what the word is, you block part of it off. So CAR, most people know car, and then PEN, they can usually, even kindergartners can sound out three-letter words usually, right? Like very, very young children, even children who struggle with reading usually at some point can sound out three-letter words with short vowel sounds. So car, pen, ter. That's three different sounds or three different sections in that word with three letters and short vowel sounds. And so usually, except for the R-controlled vowels, they would be able to sound that out. And so that's what I would say for reading and for helping children who are below on their reading, is just to get them to read, and to read within their intellectual ability, not necessarily on their reading level, because they'll be more likely to read books that are intellectually stimulating, and it might require more, though, from you to help them do that. So, generally those are the two ways. The other thing that people oftentimes will talk about is their kids don't write very well or very much, and they don't like writing. And I think writing is definitely something that you have to build up to. And so even for my kids that wrote well, I still have to build up every year to writing. And so how I do that is we start with one sentence a day, and then we go to 2 sentences, and then 3 sentences, and then 4, and then 5. And so it's first week is 1 sentence, the second week is 2 sentences, the third week we can write 3 sentences, and the fourth week we can do 4 sentences, and then we go from there. So the more that we write each day, the easier the writing becomes. And so you have to work up to being able to write a whole paper, or being able to write many subjects at one time that are heavy on writing. And so I hope you found this helpful. I deliberately created this video for someone in the group because I felt like I didn't have a good way of typing it out for them. And so I hope that it's helpful for you. And if you have questions, feel free to let me know.